My new home has plenty of room, front and backyard, and outside the yard for a garden. But I discovered that the ground is red clay, very hard and full of rocks. So even though I have a large tiller, you can't really run a tiller through dirt that's full of rocks. So what do you do for a garden? So this is what I came up with. Year before last, my first year here, I just had a few plants in the flower garden, and then last year I got these two little raised beds for my tomato plants and squash. So this year I was going to get more raised beds, but I just let the spring get by and I didn't. But I have a lot of pots, so this is what I did. I have my tomato plants in one raised bed, my squash, broccoli, and cauliflower in the other. I have a big pot that's growing eggplant. They're not very big yet because I had to replant twice. The seeds I had didn't come up. So my tomato plants are doing well. They're thriving. I have lots of little tomatoes, good sized tomatoes. This time last week, I had no tomatoes. I had only blooms. And these tomatoes have grown in the past week. I have potatoes in grow bags. And because it was an experiment, I've never used grow bags before. I used some of my canvas type book bags, and they're not holding up very well. So depending on what my yield is, my potato yield, I'll probably invest in some actual grow bags next year, because if you take care of them, they'll last at least more than one season. I have some watermelon plants in a couple of pots, and I have my cucumbers growing over here in a pot, growing up what used to be part of my rail for my back deck and the little fence I've put up. I have some later cucumbers coming on in another pot, and I have this little kitty wading pool that I drilled holes in. It was here in the yard, so I said, why not use it? So I filled it with good potting soil, and I have some mustard and kale planted in it. I don't have a good stand yet, and I'm debating whether to replant, but I did get a pepper plant recently that I put in there, and I have a couple of watermelon plants coming up in one side. So I'm actually growing a lot of different things. I have some lettuce that's ready to harvest, and my squash is blooming. And I've just noticed that something's eating my broccoli plant, so I have to break out the 7 dust. But I also have some beets growing around underneath the tomato plants, and I don't know how well they're going to do, but I thought I might make at least a mess or two. So I have a lot of different things growing, even though I don't have an actual garden. And on the deck, one end of the deck, I have a little tomato plant that I've set out just this week. I had started some from seeds, and they haven't grown very fast. I have some winter savory and some basil plants in a pot. that's growing nicely. I have some more little tomato plants there, the cherry tomato plants that I started from seeds. A couple of them are big enough now to set out. And out in front of the house, I do have a little area along the fence, right behind the fence line, that I have a few things planted. It's taken me a couple years, but I do have part of it. I do have part of the row dug up with most of the rocks removed, or the big ones. And last year I set out a couple of raspberry plants and a couple of blackberries that are doing quite well. But last year the few plants that I put on the other end didn't do well because that area does not get enough sunshine here. But this year I have some pole beans and some bush type butter beans and some okra set out that seems to be doing very well. I need to thin some. But even if you don't have a large area, there are things you can do to have a garden. Even if it's in an apartment, you can grow some things in pots. So whatever your situation is, there's always some option available for you to have a little garden. And nothing's more satisfying than picking something that you've grown yourself. So it's always nice to see the hard work you put into a garden come to fruition when you're able to pick something to have for supper.